Ruthie from FS Securities, a stockbroking firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And every Monday morning I go through what happened globally around the world and try to forecast what we may see this coming weeks. And of course I'll show you how investors and traders can make money on our stock market. I'll show you how what is hot, what is not, and what you should hold and what you should fold. So enjoy the presentation. If you have any feedback, please give us some feedback. We appreciate that very much. Well, first of all, that's what happened overnight on Saturday morning. We've seen that the Dow was actually down 361 points, 1.7% down to 21,052. The S&P 500 was down 1.5% to 2,488. And the Nasdaq Technology Index was down 1.5% as well. In Europe, the Stoxx 50 Index, which comprises most major European markets, was down nearly 1%. And in London, the FTSE 100 Index was up 1.1%. And in Germany, the DAX was down 0.5%. In Japan, the Nikkei Index was flat. And in China, the Shanghai Index was down 0.5%. On our market on Friday, we were down 87 points or 1.7%. And by the way, the futures this morning indicate that most likely the market will open higher by 46 points. And on the commodities, gold on Saturday was at $1,645, $8 increase overnight. And silver was trading at $14.50, 16 cents down. And by the way, the Australian dollar will give you 59.9 US cents, 55.5 euro cents, and 48.9 British pence, and 102 New Zealand. Looking at the Dow chart, and you can see that last week we've seen a reasonable green candle. However, look, it reached a higher point. However, by the end of the week it was below half point of the week rise. So it's actually a little bit of a hopeful trend, but it's not really very strong. And you look at the daily, we've had too many days coming down, and for the last 7 trading days we've seen some light at the end of the tunnel. However, on Thursday and Friday we've seen negative trend, and of course not helped a great deal by the number of payroll claims, which by the way it increased by 700,000. Well, we'll probably see by the end of this week, we might see that the unemployment figures in America probably around the 5-6%, and we might see that it's probably close enough to maybe more than 11 million people are unemployed now in America. Now, looking at what happened the last 2 weeks, over the full week and from around the globe, we start with the Dow Jones, and that's of course the index that makes up the top 30 US stocks, had a weekly fall of 2.7% or 584 points. Well, what does it mean? It means a great deal if you put 2 weeks together, and you'll find that if you put the 2 weeks together, the American market was up 10%. So I wouldn't worry too a great deal by the 2.7% despite the bad unemployment figures. But over the last 2 weeks, all the indices in America were actually higher. So that's probably an indication that we might have seen the bottom of the trend. I don't know yet, but of course we will see. Depends on the unemployment figures in the coming weeks. The US dollar over the last 2 weeks lost a bit of strength, nearly 2.2%, and of course that helped the Australian dollar to go up by 3.3%. On the commodities, gold closed on Saturday at 1,648, and that was actually $18 higher, and that is actually nearly 1%. However, when you look at what happened over the last 2 weeks, you'll find that gold was up 9.8% or 147 or 148 US dollars per ounce. Silver over the last week was down 0.7% or 10 cents. And by the way, if you look at what happened to silver over the last 2 weeks, you wouldn't take too much notice of the decline last week, but over the last 2 weeks it was up by 15% or nearly $2. So remember, it was nearly down to nearly $12 per ounce. That's a major drop for silver. On the other hand, crude oil was up 33% last week to $29 US per barrel. However, if you look at the last 2 weeks together, obviously we had a bad week 2 weeks ago, but you put the 2 weeks together, we were still up 23% up in the crude oil. That's the West Texas crude oil. Now, if you look at other currencies, other commodities, and by the way, if you want those figures, all you have to do is call us. And I know, by the way, important for BHP, Rio, and Fortescue was down 0.5% to $83.30 US per ton, and that is down $3 US over the last week. And the currency, again, I've mentioned the currency were actually, as I mentioned, the Australian dollar was up and the US dollar was down. Now, looking at our mechanical system that we have designed, putting the indicators for 1 week and the daily, the weekly and the daily, and over the week the indicators were showing that the American market is still in a bearish trend, despite what happened a couple of days ago. As you can see, on Wednesday and Thursday, the indicators on the daily started to turn bullish for the very aggressive trader. However, by the Friday, it turned bearish. And that confirms the bearish here, the weekly and the daily. If you look at gold, we started to see greater bullish trend still for the very aggressive trader. Remember, the aggressive trader and the very aggressive trader relies on the indicators as shown on the short-term charts. For the investor, we look at the monthly and the weekly. And of course, these don't change regularly. You have to wait for the end of the month before the monthly indicators start to change. And so therefore, it's a lagging indicator, and the investor is a slow type of investor. However, the very aggressive trader can trade very aggressively on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. So you're looking at gold. On the weekly, it's turned to turn bullish, and again we started to see the bullish trend in gold going back as far as Wednesday and Thursday, and confirmed that on Friday as well. Now, looking at the Australian market, that's the ASX 200. Again, we follow more or less the lead in America. We had 4 bad weeks of declines. We had the first green candle in 5 weeks. Whether that will continue, I'm not really sure. However, you notice here that the candle, the weekly candle, finished off the week on nearly the high end of the weekly, while the America, it wasn't. Now, looking at here, and by the way, we rely very heavily on what's happening in China. If China starts to come back good in their economy, our economy is going to prosper because of China. And we've seen here that the last 4 days, we didn't really finish too badly. We had various bad weeks, and then we started to see an increase in the price. However, I really want to show you that on the daily chart, the black line is actually the 200-day moving average. The pink is actually the 100-day moving average, and the orange is the 50-day moving average. And when we see the 50 below the 200, that is actually a bearish indication. And now we can see that the pink, which is the 100, is starting to drop below the 200. we cannot really start to think that the trend has reversed until we start to see more indication about the 50 and the 100 and the 200. Now, of course, they take much longer time to form, but until we start a completely reversal confirmed with a great confidence, we need to see the 50-day moving average above the 200. So keep that in mind, and don't forget that indicators will always tell you what's really happening in the market. Now, at the closing bell and over the full week, our market was up 4.7%. That is 225 points, and it closed at 5,067. And over the full 2 weeks, the ASX 200, which is our gauge, was up 5.2%. And by the way, the ASX index, our market gauge, is made up to a greater extent by two major indicators or major sectors, the financial and the materials. Well, last week the financial sector was up 4.2%, and that is 0.6% over the last 2 weeks. And the material sectors, on the other hand, was up 4.1% and 8.3% over the last 2 weeks. What does it tell you? It tells you that we rely on China. China buys our iron ore. When the material sectors go up by 8.3% over 2 weeks, it tells you that we are selling more iron ore to China, which improves the performance of BHP, Rio and Fortescue. You go to the right hand side and you see here BHP was up 12.3% last week, and over to the last 2 weeks was still very positive, 4.5%. Look at Rio, 8.5% over the last week and 3.7% over the last 2 weeks. So remember that when both sectors are up or down strongly, the market reacts accordingly. And in terms of looking at across all sectors, the best sector last week from our technical analysis was energy. That also has improved the performance of our market, because Santos, look at Santos, up 31% last week, and Woodside Petroleum 23%. Putting the 2 weeks together, Santos was up 17% over the last 2 weeks, and Woodside Petroleum again 17% over the last 2 weeks. Remember, oil, it depends very much on what's happening between Saudi Arabia and Russia. There is a price war between the two two exporting nations, and of course Saudi Arabia wants to see America to curtail their export of their oil. But I tell you what, when the price of oil is so low, these fracking oil companies in America cannot make money. So you can see between America, which is now an exporting nation, Saudi Arabia and Russia, they're all fighting for market control. And as a matter of interest, across all the top stocks, the best performing stock over the last week was Santos, as I mentioned, Woodside Petroleum, and CIMIC, which is the Old Leighton Holdings. CIMIC was up 18%. Worst performing stocks were actually AMP and Woolies. AMP was down 7.6% last week, and Woolworths down 5.3%. Now we like to look at volume, because if the prices go up and the volume goes down, that's not really a good indication. We love to see prices going up and volume going up. What we see here on Thursday and Friday, the declines exceeded advances. And look at the volume here, daily volume, dropping quite a bit. Look at the advances of decline over week. Of course, we've seen the advances increased and exceeding the declines. However, the volume is low. This is the daily volume, and these are weekly advances over declines. And you can see here we've had reasonable 2 weeks, as you can see here, over the last 7 trading days. 2, 4, 6, 8 trading days. We've had 5 days with advances over the declines, and only 3 declines over the advances. So I mean, the market is volatile and unpredictable at the moment. Looking at our mechanical system for the sectors, you can see here on Saturday morning we looked at the weekly indicators, and for the very aggressive traders, the indicators that move very fast are the ones that are actually on the daily, while the indicators that are actually shown on the monthly are actually very slow and they're still bearish. But the good sign here is that week on week we are seeing more bullish indicators for the very aggressive trader than the previous 2 weeks. And going back on the daily, this is the daily and that's the weekly. Again, if you look at what's happening here as far as the sectors, the ASX 50 starting to turn bullish on the daily. Gold, remember, gold starting to look bearish on the daily. Again, so that means you've got to be very careful. If you've got some gold stocks in your portfolio, you may want to take some profit. But of course, the daily will actually change on a daily basis, and the weekly will only change on a weekly basis. And with our mechanical system, by the way, which determines what trade we have, is based actually on having the weekly sending the message to the daily. So if you have a bullish weekly indicator, the daily indicators will have to continue to be on a daily basis on the bullish side to continue to trade on the bullish side. So if you have a bullish indicator at the end of the week with a bullish, and on Monday you still have the daily indicator on the daily to be bullish, it may change on Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday. So remember that if you have a bullish weekly and daily bullish, you trade. If you have bullish weekly and neutral daily, then you take some money out of the market. And by the way, we run courses on a daily basis, and we run courses for whoever wants them, and we teach you how to look at indicators and perform very intelligently in the market. Okay, now in terms of the advance, the most active company on Friday, we can see that Fortescue Metals went up by 5.3%, Oil Search 4.6%, Treasury Wine, people are drinking more wine while they are at home, 3.4%. IAG, that's the old NRMA, 3.3%, and so on. Finally, I want to tell you that every day and every week we look at stocks that have actually had excessive volume. If a stock has had excessive volume above the 50 period volume, we like to actually understand why. A company called Bellevue Gold, the price went up by 20%, and the volume, which is usually on a weekly basis, had 5.7 million transactions. Well, last week this company had 16 million traded stocks. So this is very quickly, it tells us why we should really go straight to it and look and see why. And Bigger Cheese, the price went up by 7%, and the volume over the week was nearly double the weekly volume. Again, we want to have a look at this company. On the bearish side, Webjet, the price dropped by 0.7%, and the volume was nearly 500%. The weekly volume was 5.8, the average 5.8 million, and last week we had 35 million, actually 36 million traded in transactions. Again, we need to have a look at this. And by the way, if you want this slide, a copy of this slide, you talk to us and we'll give it to you. Now on the daily volume, Rio had an increase of nearly 2%, and the volume was up 10% above its average volume. Not a great deal above its excessive traded, so you still have to look at that. On the bearish side, Woolworths, it dropped by 0.7% and had 5% increase in the volume. Not a great deal. However, when you look at the mid cap, Bellevue Gold, what we said, Bellevue Gold on the weekly and on the daily. On Friday, Bellevue had 14% increase in the price and 430% in the volume. Again, it may require some attention. Now, in terms of dividends, for those people who look for dividends, these are all the companies that will actually offer you some dividends. TPG on the 9th will give you 3 cents, not a great deal. So it's not really an excessive. However, you look at this, it's 0.7% yield. But a company such as Pengana, it's offering you 6.5% yield. WAM Research, 7.8%. We also show you that a company called Tamawood offering 15% yield. The price, giving you, by the way, the last price was $2.60, offering you 15.2% yield, offering you 12 cents on 2.57 price. Shaver Shop offering you 13.5% yield. Remember, the share price is 34 cents and giving you 2 cents dividends. Again, this is available to you if you want it. All you have to do is call us. And finally, we want to show you what we've traded on our CFDs. You can see there are a lot more green here. So we've had some good luck. Remember, we've had major losses several weeks ago, and we started to recover those losses. And finally, before we go, our disclaimer. Everything we said here for you today is actually of general advice only, and before you take any action, please talk to us or talk to your professional advisor. Nothing is guaranteed in this market. There are some risks and there are some rewards. So of course, before you take any action, you need to be aware that there is no guarantee that everything we said will turn gold. If you have any question, by the way, all you have to do is call us or talk to us. You can send me an email on george@fssecurities.com.au, and if you're calling from overseas, 61 is the country code. 61, you don't need the 0. 61 411 259526. 61 for the country code, 411 259526. And there is me, and I wish you happy trading and happy successful week.